All right, good afternoon, everyone. A special meeting of the Board of Trustees of Harlandale Independent School District will be held Wednesday, May 31st, 2023, beginning at 6:15. It is now 6:16. Central Office, PDC 102 Genevieve, San Antonio, Texas, 78214. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If IT is okay to go ahead and do the roll call. All right. Great. Overall roll call is open. We'll go ahead and close it. All right, wonderful. So everyone is here and present. We are missing Miss Carrillo, and she does send her regards. I believe she is still celebrating her son's graduation. And also in attendance, we do have Dr. Castleberry, our conservator as well. So thank you, ma'am. So I do declare a quorum, and we are going to the next item, 1C. Mr. Soto, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and your staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Board of Trustees, HISD Community. This evening, we have our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance, Mr. Richard Hernandez.
Here.
We have our Executive Director of Operations, Dr. Juan Hinojosa.
Here.
We have our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Melissa Casey.
Here.
We have our Executive Director of Human Resources, Dr. Melinda Salinas.
Here.
And we have our Public Information Officer, Ms. Mariana Vieira.
Here.
All right, great. We're going to go ahead and continue on to item 2, public comment. We're going to go ahead and call the first individuals in order. Just a reminder that a time frame of 30 minutes has been set aside to address the board on any subject or concern. The time allowed to each person will depend on the numbers of people wishing to address the board. And so in going in the order, we are going to have Miss Natalie Clifford join us first. And I know we have the time clock above projected for you guys. So as soon as you guys are ready, IT should be ready.
Good evening, Superintendent Soto, Cabinet members, Board Chair Moreno, board members, and colleagues in the Harlandale ISD community. My name is Natalie Clifford, and I serve as the president of the Harlandale Education Association. I'm here tonight alongside many of my colleagues to urge you all to strongly consider a pay raise for all employees that reflects the dignity of our work and the years of service employees have given. As members of the Harlandale Education Association, we are affiliated with the National Education Association, which is the largest labor union in the country. Although we represent the interests of workers in the school district, our interests are inseparable from the interests of our students, families, and the Southside community with whom we collaborate every day. Compensating educators fairly is a means to providing the best education possible to our students, which I know we all agree they certainly deserve. We have said this before at previous board meetings, and we will continue to say it again. Our hourly colleagues in particular deserve a far greater wage than they are currently receiving, with a starting rate of $13.10 an hour. Last week during the budget work session, the board considered an increase to $14 an hour for starting pay. However, not only is this still behind the majority of other school districts in the area, there are 6 districts who already pay a minimum wage of $15 an hour. The majority of these districts still have not finalized their budget for the upcoming school year, so they will likely increase their hourly pay above $15 an hour. We need to catch up, not simply to be competitive, but because many of our hourly workers also reside within the school district and send their kids to our public schools here in Harlandale. This represents an investment in the future of our community. If we truly are a family working together, we must address this inequality. The board can take action on changing hourly workers' pay at any time, different from pay for salaried workers on contract. Last week at the budget work session, the school board also received information regarding a 3% proposed raise on the midpoint for teachers. We in the union advocate that newer teachers receive their raise along the midpoint, while more experienced teachers, such as those beyond 5 years of experience receive their percentage raise based on their actual salary. This is because the midpoint favors newer employees whose starting salary is generally higher. And by giving a raise on the midpoint for more experienced workers, they end up receiving less of a raise, which devalues the years of dedicated work that these more longstanding employees have provided to the district. The school board has considered and approved options like this in the past. In conclusion, we recognize that this is a difficult time in public education in Texas due to a disappointing legislative session in which the basic allotment to public school districts was not increased. Nevertheless, we ask you to remember that the majority of workers are teachers and hourly staff, without whom our district could not function. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening. And in the words of Pete Seeger, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, continuing on, if we may have Mr. Jose Llamas. And as you're aware, Mr. Llamas will have the time clock there posted for you, and you can continue as soon as you're ready. We'll have IT ready to go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Jose Llamas. I'm a teacher at McCollum High School, and I've been teaching for 20 years now, 18 of which have been with the Harlandale District. I'm also a former Marine, and the reason that I mentioned that is because in the Marine Corps, there was a motto that we lived by that went by Semper Fidelis, which means always faithful. Well, that is something that I've apparently carried over into my teaching. I've been faithful to the district, I've been faithful to my school, but most especially, I've been faithful to my students. And I know for a fact that there are also many more hardworking teachers like myself that are just as faithful to the students as I have been. For that reason, I'm here today to ask you to provide our teachers with an increase in 3% in wages. Currently, the cost of living has been increasing drastically. Inflation is up around 8%. Food, gas, utilities, housing are all increasing in price. The yearly pay increase for teachers, which is less than 1%, is not keeping up with that inflation. I myself work a second job on weekends and on holidays to supplement my income. And although I am saving for retirement, there are times that I don't know if that will be enough when I retire. And although I'm faithful to Harlandale, I don't plan on working until I'm 100 years old. Right now, there's a teacher shortage also in Texas and across the nation. At McCollum, there were some vacancies that could not be filled this entire year. So other teachers and administrators had to give their time that would typically be given for planning and parent conferences to help out in those classes. This means that students didn't have a teacher that could consistently help them throughout the year. And as a result, many teachers are leaving or considering leaving because of the increase in duties and stress that come with it. My argument today is that an increase in wages and additional stipends will keep the teachers that have stayed faithful with the district, as well as attract badly needed new teachers. And keeping in mind that all of this will benefit students. There are people who say teachers should get paid more. Well, maybe today, this is the time all of you can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Continuing on to Mr. Adam Garcia. And again, friendly reminder, Mr. Garcia, we have the time clock posted above, and IT will start as soon as you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. My name is Adam Garcia, and I want to say thank you for allowing me to speak in this forum. So I've been an educator for 23 years, just like Mr. Llamas. I enjoy my job here at Harlandale. I've been at McCollum High School for 6 years now, and I really like instructing over there at McCollum High School. I teach AP Government, AP Macro. I worked in a variety of schools, such as private and charter schools, but I feel like this is the best situation for me at Harlandale. In my career, I would like to retire at Harlandale ISD, but the pay continues to be a challenge for me. I drive here 22 miles going to and 22 miles going back, but I think it's well worth it to work with the students here at Harlandale. At McCollum High School, we continue to lose talent each year. Just today, I heard teachers talking that, we're losing a lot of teachers this year, and it's a shame to lose colleagues. And every year, I don't know most of them. At McCollum High School, seems like we have a high turnover rate. So let's put an end to that by increasing wages to attract and keep talent. When we get new teachers, let's keep them. Let's keep their enthusiasm. Let's keep their aspirations. I know currently, like Ms. Clifford said, our representatives in Austin apparently will not increase our wages based on what happened this past week. And due to the attaching a bill that was tied to vouchers. And here in public schools, we work very hard. I think we do well with our teachers over here. I worked at a charter school and they work you really hard, and they have people that don't have any certification, but over here, all our teachers are certified. Okay. So today I'd like to conclude by saying, please consider pay increase. I want to continue to work at this wonderful school district. We were at graduation yesterday, and to see the faces of all those young women and men out there going to be in our community makes me so proud, and it makes me like so excited to yell their name and to wish them the best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, continuing on to Miss Susan Salinas. You can proceed, ma'am. And as always, Miss Salinas, we will have the time clock projected, and IT will start as soon as you're ready, the 3-minute limit.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Susan Salinas, TSTA staff, speaking tonight on the budget. The proposal for pay raises presented last week was a good start. When teachers look for a job, they look at the hiring pay scales on a district website and not market share. If you look at the hiring schedules for this year, Southside pays a teacher with 16 years of experience $4,690 more than Hardendale does. When 6 districts pay more than Hardendale out of 10, this makes it harder for Hardendale to recruit and retain the best and brightest. As you may know, most districts are passing a 3% pay increase for all employees. I was at Edgewood last night. That's what they're passing. I know other school districts are doing the same thing. If Hardendale stays with a proposal for teachers, you all will be at the same place as you are this year. You'll be behind 6 other districts. Currently, Hardendale is rated 6 out of 10. We encourage the board to vote on a pay increase based on a person's salary and not the midpoint. Also, those above the midpoint, they should receive a higher percentage raise, maybe 4 or 5%, to reward their loyalty and for making Hardendale their career. For our classified and paraprofessional employees, San Antonio pays a minimum of $16, with Edgewood, Southwest, Southside, Judson, and East Central paying $15 an hour for classified, not paras, classified. If Hardendale only increases the minimum hourly rate to 14 or 15, you're still behind those 6 districts, and they're all giving a 3% already on their midpoints. For our hourly employees, we're asking that you start at maybe 17. All pay grades should be adjusted with the new pay grades. That means pay grades 1 through 4. I think they're below 17 right now. They have to adjust the whole thing. Our employees at that hourly rate, they will give a raise they've never seen before. Instead of 49 cents or 60 cents, they actually will get a decent raise. Hardendale will be above all other districts, and hopefully all vacant positions will be filled. The repurposing of schools, changing a calendar, health insurance, and filling vacant positions has made this a very stressful year. The inability of the Texas legislation to pass a bill that supports public education is deplorable. It is shameful that all public schools have to work with no more monies while voucher schools are flush with monies. Thank you for your time, and HEA hopes you'll consider many options before making a final decision on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Continuing on with Miss Mari Cruz Martinez. And as always, Miss Martinez, we have the time clock projected and visible, and IT will start when you're ready, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mari Cruz Martinez. About 15 years ago, I was a substitute. Then 13 years ago, I became an assistant pre-K teacher. making $9.54 an hour. How did I support myself and my 2 children as a single parent? In 2023, starting rate for a para is $13.10. In 13 years, the rate has only gone up $3.56. What? I have now been a teacher for going on 13 years. We have had hard, difficult, and often very trying times. One of those recently known as the coronavirus years that upturned lives in teaching as we knew it. Now in 2023, in order to survive, our district has had to consolidate schools. And because of this, we are currently witnessing many decide to leave. We wish them well and thank them for the time served to educate our great students. We wouldn't want them to leave, but they've decided. Many of us are staying as we do year after year. We return to educate the future hope of our city, our state, and our country. I am sure we can all agree, without our support staff, educators could not do our jobs. Our support staff endures so much more than we are ever aware of. Many of them not making enough to do more than live and barely make ends meet. But they show up. If SAISD and East Central pay para $16, why doesn't HISD pay them $17? It's time. We strive to be innovative and ahead of the rest, then let's be well-rounded and pay as well. Money is allocated in the budget for unfilled positions for a few years now, and several positions at district levels are now vacant. Do not fill them, or fill them only if absolutely necessary. Use that budgeted money to keep those at the front line in the schools and classrooms to stay in our district. I need to be honest though, this was the first year that I really thought, what am I doing here? I love what I do and I love seeing the outcomes and growth year after year in my students. This year I had 24 second graders, well, 25 with my 1 ALE inclusion student. I did not think I would make it. My stress levels were at maximum. I know many of my colleagues are feeling it too, because if nothing else, we continuously talked each other off of the I'm out of here ledge. And it's not always the students, or actually it's never the students. In January, I literally said more than once, God, you take the wheel over completely. He kept me steadfast. My students and I reached several accomplished and distinguished ratings and a perfect 5 in student growth. And I'm very proud of it. I will keep showing up and perfecting my craft for all our deserving students, each and every one of them. I ask you, our leaders, to please take care of us by paying us fairly. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Continuing on to Mr. Noe Garza. And again, Mr. Garza, friendly reminder, we do have the 3 minutes projected up for the time limit. And as soon as you're ready, IT will be ready to go.
Good evening, Mr. Mancha. There's a story behind this hat. I know that every time that I come, it's like, man, you step it up. But anyway, this hat was given to me. It's all about love, right? Our last day at Columbia Heights with students. First grader, Adrian. And his brother, third grader, Miguel. Great students. I call them speed 1 and speed 2 because they have a lot of speed and they're just wonderful kids. They made that sacrifice to come from another campus. Remember when we had that dual language academy going? So I wore it in their honor. And anyway, I'm here. You know what you need to do. You know, you chose to be in this leadership position and you're crunching numbers. I know you are. You know, you have a very difficult task. But when I was mentoring this gentleman, great PE coach, Adam Martinez at Columbia Heights this year, one of the things that I stood in my mind, it says, when you lose a quality teacher, it takes about 11 years to replace him. 1. And I'm also going to brag a little bit about Columbia Heights because we went down swinging. I don't know if it was posted yet, but I think we set a record for that contest. We had 11 winners at the Centro Cultural Aslan citywide superhero contest. And they created their own superheroes. Didn't copy anything. Pre-K through 5th. So we're going to hopefully carry on that tradition to Harlandale High School, where I'll be teaching in August. So I'm fired up. Hopefully the students will be fired up too. I have a lot of teaching in me, but I love this. I almost went to Northside, and I thank God I didn't.
Thank you, sir. Continuing on to Ms. Deborah Zuniga. And again, Ms. Zuniga, as you're aware, we do have the time projected for the time limit, and as soon as you're ready, IT will proceed.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Board President Moreno, board members, Superintendent Soto, and cabinet members. I am Deborah Zuniga, educator of 21 years at Harlandale High School and proud member of Harlandale Education Association. Thank you for the opportunity to be up here to be able to talk about pay raises. Being a teacher is such a rewarding occupation as we are challenged with educating and molding our future right in our own classrooms. Just the other day at Harlandale graduation, a San Antonio police officer who was working the graduation came up to me. Ms. Zuniga, do you remember me? You were my teacher 11 years ago. I stood there so proud. One, that he remembered me, and two, knowing that I had some part in molding this young man into what he is today. Teachers are being asked to carry on multiple job duties that they were not originally hired for and or duties they do not feel comfortable doing. We're losing many of our good teachers to other school districts because they pay better. So now many of us are losing our teacher planning periods and carrying on extra classes to fill the void without extra compensation. It seems as if every year we are given more on our plate without taking anything off. Teachers have always had multiple roles as educators, counselors, and sometimes second moms or dads to our students. But now we're asked to be trauma medic nurses, security guards, and armed officers. I am standing here asking for decent pay raises for our teachers, but without increasing our health insurance. So many of my colleagues are frustrated that every time we get a little pay increase only to raise our health insurance costs. We can never win. As I stated in my previous speech, with the cost of inflation as it is today, and many of my fellow teachers still having student loans to pay besides the cost of living, many of my fellow teachers can hardly afford apartment cost, and many definitely can't afford to buy a house. Remember our Harlandale mission statement. Harlandale is a family working together to create a high-quality education for our students. Family. Family takes care of each other. You are our leaders, can show that teachers matter, are valued, and are part of the Harlandale family by paying us our worth. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we can have Ms. Gabriel Garcia. Hey, sir. Good to see you.
Good evening.
And as always, sir, Mr. Garcia, as you know, the 3 minutes is projected, and as soon as you're ready, IT will be ready to go, sir.
Thank you. My name is Gabriel Garcia. I'm a teacher at Leal Middle School. I've been with the district for 18 years. The last couple of days, it's pretty tough for teachers because we have to pack up. We have to pack up everything we have and, take it home. And Friday, I guess at the end of business, I become a free agent because my contract is up. My contract and I guess 100 other teachers' contracts are up. So now with our bags packed, our minivans are loaded up with our stuff. We're free agents. We can go anywhere. I mean, I like to think about it for a little while. Like, where can I go? Make that T chart, should I stay or should I go? 18 years, that's a lot of time. I graduated from Harlandale High School, and I've got a lot of commitment to this neighborhood. But, when I'm in the parking lot, I see the new teachers, packing up, and I wonder, how many of them are going to return? And they all say, well, we'll see you, first day of school. But, any given year, we lose 18 to 20 teachers alone at our campus. And that's a lot of talent, and it's hard teaching. Teaching is tough. Every day you got to show up, every day, entertain the kids. I mean, you have to really, it takes a lot. So, after a couple of years of experience, we lose good teachers. And a lot of them say it's to be a little closer to home. But I'm sure, just like me, they make that T-chart and they wonder, is it worth it? As it is, teachers buy their own supplies, they buy their own chairs, they even paint, their own rooms sometimes. Sometimes it costs us to be a teacher. But I know that this is the job we signed up for and we know what we're getting into. So, I have no illusions in that matter. Sometimes I wonder if I took the vow of poverty when I signed up to be a teacher. But thank you guys for all your time. I've been coming to a lot of these meetings and I can imagine all the time you guys give up. So thank you for everything that y'all do.
Thank you, guys. That concludes the public comments. Moving on to item 3, consider and take appropriate action regarding the approval of proposed 2023 tax rate, which will be published in a notice as required by current law under section 44.004 of the Texas Education Code. Mr. Soto, would you like to present the item first?
Yes, sir. At this time, Mr. Hernandez will go over tax rate.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this evening, we're providing the proposed tax rate in order for us to officially publish our notice, which is required before adoption of our budget in June, on June 19th, the regular board meeting. The information being provided is the result of what we can decipher from the recent legislation of the 88th legislature. Again, the state continues in its efforts to compress the tax rate, and they do this by limiting the amount of collections that are received by a school district by lowering the tier 1 tax rate. So in looking at the amount that we are capped at on our tax rate, and then adding the amount of what they call the enrichment part, the amount that can be maxed at the maintenance and operation tax rate is at 0.9333 for the 23-24 year. Last year, it was at 0.9429, which is basically a decrease of 0.0096. Now, to offset that, that's what the state provides the school district from their state budget in order to accomplish this, what they call tax compression. The maintenance and the interest and sinking tax rate remains at 0.50 cents in order to service the debt that the district has when it passed its bond issues and prior bond issues to that. So again, this evening, Mr. Chairman, we're recommending a proposed approved tax rate for the maintenance and operation taxes at 0.9333 and the interest and sinking rate at 0.50, which is a total of 1.44333. And again, this is in order for us to publish the notice. The official adoption of the tax rate will be in August. What this is including is what we know of the state values. And when we get the final value in July of our local property values, this compressed rate can actually go lower.
All right, thank you, sir. Should we go ahead, Mr. Resendez, and make a motion in order to consider and discuss? So would anyone like to make that motion for the team?
Mr. Chair. I move to approve the proposed 2023 tax rate, which will be published in a notice as required by current law under section 44.004 of the Texas Education Code.
All right, we got a motion by Ms. Cavazos. Is there a second?
I second to discuss and discussion.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ortiz. We do have a second. So Ms. Ortiz or Ms. Cavazos, would you like to take the lead in the discussion?
I would. Well, I've just got
Yes, go
just
ahead, ma'am.
a couple of questions. Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, ma'am.
So when do we have the compressed tax rate? Is that necessarily mean that we're going to receive less money for this coming budget year? And we're basing, if the tax rate that you are proposing passes, it's going to cover everything that we're talking about as far as raises and
Right, and so the first part to your question is that what the state does is they set aside part of their budget in order to accomplish this tax rate. So the difference between what the rate was last year and what's being proposed this year, the state is basically providing additional money to the district that it normally would raise if the tax rate had remained the same. So on the sheet here, it has a tax rate at 0.94. And so what's being recommended is the state is actually capping us that we can't go higher than 0.93 based on what their values are of the district. So then what they do is they provide from their state budget to make up that difference. So we're not losing state dollars on it. What they're doing is they're paying for that difference. Now, what we're proposing this evening is just as we did the last work session, is the increases that were presented. So what we're doing here is not going to impact what we proposed last board meeting.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
ma'am.
and
Yes, Nicolás.
it's not going to impact it because we are basing it on more than we're basing it on less than they could possibly give us. Or am I completely wrong on that?
Well, we're basing it on, as part of the existing law, they changed the amount that's awarded or that's given in their funding formulas under what they call tier 2 funding. So that that allotment under tier 2 is going up to $126. So that's where we're looking at funds in order to provide the increase, along with the changes that we made by repurposing the schools, looking at vacancies, seeing what needs to be filled, what does not need to be filled, and then look after that assessment, then determining what kind of increases we are proposing as what we did last week.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
And this is probably my last question.
No, that's fine.
But so are we maximizing the amount of money we could get from the state, or does the state set that limit and that's where we're going?
Yes, ma'am. And
There's no way to increase it.
well, we are maximizing it
The state,
By-
I'm talking about the state part,
by the state
not,
part.
not us, but
Right,
the state,
right,
the
correct.
state reimbursement.
So in other words, if we adopt a lower rate than what we've got right now at 9.33, then the state will only provide us the funding to match our efforts. So if we go with a lower rate, they're not gonna provide us as much money. But that's not what we're doing. We're maximizing the rate that they're gonna provide us with so that we maximize state funding. So included in this rate is what the district did back in 2008 in order to maximize the amount of state funding that's available to the district by going to what they call tier 2 monies. So we're getting all what they call the golden pennies on that rate. So in that effort, we're providing the maximum that we can get. Now, there is room to do an additional an add-on to the tax rate, but that's where you go into a tax rate election in order to increase the tax rate. And that's where, again, that goes to the voters. Before you go do that, you have to have an audit done of the district in general.
Yes, Mr. Luna.
So just for historical perspective, has this rate the amount been going down? Because I remember it's always used to be over $1 something, $1.17, right? More or less back way when. You know, this is less than $1.
Yes, and that's driven by what the state law has in HB3, what they passed as far as what the state's efforts to compress the tax rate. In other words, the state was looking at providing property tax relief by controlling the amount of monies that the district can collect in its tax collections. And they do that by controlling the amount of the tax rate that a school district can assess.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything to add, a comment, question, or? Hmm. So I know in this regards, Mr. Hernandez, I know you've always kind of given us a fair balance of ideas and a very conservative outlook. I know based on the assessments, and kind of the, what you alluded to with the tax compression, and I think that's been a big argument throughout this legislative session. And then wanting to provide that property tax relief, and that's one of the reasons why they went into a special session that was called immediately on Monday, and they met, I think, yesterday, right in the morning. Is there any other updates that we can know? Because based on what you kind of alluded to, you referenced that this can all change and it could be even lower. And do you know how that would impact this going forward?
Sure. And so what this rate is being computed on is using the state's values of the district. Now, we still have local property values that, as we know, are under protest. Once on July the 25th is when we get a certified value from the Bureau Appraisal District, which then that's the basis for determining what's the adopted tax rate that the state can, or that the district can assess in for the 23-24 year. That's the part that will contribute to the lowering of the tax rate once we get those values certified in July. And so in August, we actually bring the final adopted rate based on that final certified value that we get from the appraisal district.
And I know you keep up to speed on pretty much everything dealing with finances throughout the state. Could you kind of enlighten us as a team in regards to, I know we always reference the golden pennies, but I know there was some sort of, I don't know if it's within this bill here, but they were talking about increasing the ability to access that, or are you familiar with where that conversation is going in the legislature?
Sure. So right now, what we've seen from the past legislature and this one, it applies to this one too, is that with the changes in the state laws, we've actually got, I believe, 2.5 pennies left that we can access. But in order to access those, then we have to have a tax rate election, which goes to the voters for voter approval. If the voters approve that, then again, the state will match the district's effort in order to bring in additional funds.
Okay, thank you, sir, because I know that just kind of clarifies it,
Sure.
because I know sometimes it's just a matter of what's accessible. And so I guess that's how they're trying to make that balance or offset it. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, does anyone else like to ask a question or provide some commentary in regards to the matter? If not, there is a motion on the floor, correct? So, and there has been a second. So if we're all ready to go, IT, if you're ready to proceed, we can go ahead and call for the vote. Mr. Luna, if you don't mind, just touching the button right there. Perfect. So it is open. All right, all votes have been, it will be closing. Motion does carry. Moving on to item or 4, or not 4, excuse me. It is 4. All right, sorry. Moving on to item 4, the budget, or the board will conduct a budget work session with the superintendent and staff for the 2023-2024 budget. Mr. Soto, if you may, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Board of Trustees, with the feedback that went on last week's budget, initial budget work session, going into our second one, there's some clarifying points that Mr. Hernandez and Cabinet went over, and Mr. Hernandez will now present.
Thank you, sir. So as Mr. Soto, Superintendent Soto stated, last week is we had the budget work session. This work session is a follow-up to questions that were asked during the work session and also subsequent to that. So in front of you, we provided a notebook with some tabs that will show you a tab that has today's presentation in it, as well as right after that presentation is information regarding stipends. And so that is after a colored sheet. And so one of the requests were the stipends that were being paid to our staff. And so included in that is, I think in particular, were the coaches stipends fine arts stipends. Which you'll also see on that particular list of stipends are the ones that were approved by the board at the last May meeting regarding our math, science, bilingual, and special ed. So again, this is, as Mr. Soto said, is a follow-up to some of the questions and requests that were made. The last tab in that notebook is basically a reference. That's last week's budget presentation in case you need to refer to that. So this evening is basically a continuation of the budget presentation. And so what we're doing is basically picking up where we left off. As we ended the meeting, again, the recommendation for compensation was 3% of the midpoint for the teachers. An alternate was also discussed of 3% of the annual salary. And as what was approved by the board, the stipends for bilingual math, science from 2,000 to 4,000, and special education from 2,000 to 3,500 for special education units. Additionally, for the clerical and paraprofessionals, it is 3% of the midpoint with the minimum wage to be increased to $14 per hour. Classified, again, also has 3% of the midpoint. And of course, their hourly staff as well, the $14 minimum. But in particular on the bus drivers, increasing the minimum pay from $15.90 to $19 per hour. And again, each of those increases of the minimum pay will result in some compression. And so the budget that's being presented this evening, or the compensation that's being presented this evening, is to adjust for those employees as they become compressed closer to the minimum amount, is to increase theirs. And so that's factored into the budget.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
We are raising the paraprofessionals and the classified to $14 an hour?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Minimum pay.
that stayed. That
Yes.
was presented last week.
Yes, ma'am. And that remains. Yes, ma'am. And then the last group was the professionals, 3% of the midpoint. And so when we presented that, the cost slide, the slide related to the cost, then the amount that, based on the revenues that we were projecting on receiving of approximately 3.4 million, and the cost of the increases that were presented last week of about 4.3 million, there was a deficit of basically 892,000 or 900,000. And so as we presented at the beginning of the work session last week, where we stood with our fund balance and the impact that we were having from the ESSER funds. So basically, we just carried that over into the next year, the subsequent years after 23, 24. So basically, when we looked at our fund balance of the ESSER of 32.2, and then adding in what we were looking at a deficit regarding the wages, then our fund balance is at 31. Now, this basically carries over for the next year at 31.3. And then again, the impact of using the ESSER monies to supplant allowable costs from the general fund in order to build back up into the fund balance, but still accounting from positions on a conservative side that may still need to be funded that are under ESSER that will eventually come over to the general fund. So again, if that deficit continues to the next year, which it will, because these are increases in salaries and wages, and as we know, they're recurring costs. So that reduces our budget to 28.3. Again, you carry it over for 25, 26. And again, keep in mind in 25, 26, the new biennium starts. Again, the legislature will meet in the spring of 2025. And so again, we hope we have a better outcome than we did this last session. So again, that carrying over that deficit then brings our fund balance to 13.4. And then the next year, 26, 27 of that second biennium, if we continue with the deficit at 1.5. Now, again, what was discussed at the last board meeting is through attrition, we're looking at improving the results of our fund balance through either the positions that are being supplanted from the general fund, or what actually may be occurring in our regular positions that we have in the district. What the amounts reflect here is taken into consideration of the 8.8 million that we were projecting to save on the repurposing of those schools. So this gives you idea that any kind of any increase to what's being proposed, certainly you have what the impact will be. So if there's additional cost to any changes to what's being proposed, again, that's going to affect what the fund balance is. So just giving you an outlook of the next 4 years. So one of the things that we were tasked to look at was looking at salaries and wages, not only teacher salaries, but hourly employees, of increasing what they're currently earning by 3%. And so the added cost when you do that for teachers is at 120,000, paraprofessionals 11,000, classified 75. And actually, it's a reduction in paraprofessionals at 23. So a net overall increase of 183. Well, one of the things that we point out, and we've heard in discussion, is that those on the midpoint, if they're paid based on their current wage, they're below the midpoint. And the proposal last week was to pay a 3% increase on the midpoint. Then these particular individuals on this side of the column, this represents all those individuals that are below the midpoint. So they'll be paid based at 3% on what they're currently earning. But if it was based on the midpoint, they would be earning more than that. Again, the opposite will occur to those that are above the midpoint. If it's paid on 3% of their salaries or their wages, then these are the number of individuals that will get more than what was being budgeted for the midpoint. So what we did was we took the charts that we presented last week and added another column, because as we presented in last week's budget meeting, these are the amounts for the various pay grades in this particular group of paraprofessionals of what they would receive as a midpoint. If you do it based on what we calculated was the annual average salary of an employee at pay grade 1 with 187 days, if you're doing that at 3%, then their increase is 649 if we go the route of paying them based on what their actual wages are. If we go by the midpoint, they earn 763. So basically, that's what we're presenting here, the various pay grades. Pay grade 5, midpoint is 1,139. If you go based on what they're currently earning, 3% is 978. In classified, again, following the same format, again, pay grade 1, the midpoint is 1,065. If it's based on their average, on the annual wages, it's 747. On pay grade 5 at 41,000, midpoint is 1,462, an increase of 1,237 based on the annual wage. We then carried it over for the professionals, same format. Again, what their pay grade is, what their current salary is, the average salary for each of those pay grades, the midpoint column, and then the last column again is based on the wages that they're currently earning. Then the next question that was asked of staff to look at, and scenario that was requested of staff to look at, was again, and as we've heard discussion, so if we increase our minimum pay $14 to $15, what would be the cost to the budget? And so the added cost for increasing the minimum pay to $15 instead of $14 would be $200,000 more added to the budget. And if we do $16, then the added amount would be 1.4. And again, keep in mind that the reason there's an added cost is because as you're increasing the minimum amount, those employees that are actually under it or close to it are now going to be adjusted in order to try to maintain equity. So what we're doing here is actually working with TASB, and they factored out that it's not as quick as moving somebody closer to the midpoint, and that's a way trying to provide more time in order to get them to the midpoint if the pay ranges are adjusted as a result of this minimum increase. Because remember, if you increase the minimum amount, then that's going to affect all the other pay ranges, because those, of course, have to be adjusted in order to provide that equity.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, Ms. Cavazos, go right ahead.
Mr. Hernandez, just for my math purposes,
Yes, ma'am.
the big difference between $15 and $60 is all those pay tables have to be adjusted or recreated to fit the new increase.
Correct.
So $1 and recreating or adjusting all those pay tables, that's the difference between the $15 and the $60.
Correct. And the employees that are lying within those ranges.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Another question or request for information was on our ESSER positions. So for ESSER 2, we funded 55 positions that were budgeted. In ESSER 3, we budgeted 134 positions. Now we have MCL positions and RTI positions that we know will go away at the end of 23-24, which is the last year of the ESSER 3 monies. But again, these include all budgeted positions. There are vacant positions, and the district is making steps through or taking steps through attrition in order to determining whether those positions need to be filled. And if not, then again, that helps the budget and helps us try to meet our goal of providing increases for our staff. And then one question regarding that we received was the school districts that use the TASB study. We have those listed here: Alamo Heights, Edgewood, Judson, Northeast, San Antonio, Surge, Cibolo, and South San.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, madam.
Mr. Hernandez, I have a question.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that list is those that use TASB to present to the board.
And they adopted their study.
So they adopted the recommendation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go right ahead, Ms. Ortiz.
So I'm a little confused because the lady that did the TASB presentation last week, I asked her if the presentation that they make, because they base it on 1%, 2%, 3%, and they give the same information to all of these. But I asked her how many adopted, and she said she didn't know.
Well, we followed up with her and we asked her to provide us that information so we could share it with the board. So this information is from TASB.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I asked her was, the presentation that she gave us was based on school district information that was for last year. There was only, at that time, I think it was Edgewood was the only one who had a budget in place, but all the rest of them had not even approached their budget. So there was nothing really to compare it to, because since the rest of the school districts that they had used for referencing purposes were all based on last year's, and that we wouldn't know until maybe late August, because the other school districts don't start their budget year like we do when we start in July. So that's why I was just a little, I was trying to get a feeling of where we're going to be if these folks don't pass their budgets until August. Then, you know, we're just putting it out there for other school districts to kind of, okay, they're either going to follow or they're not, but that we were going to be out there, but not reaching the minimum wage that these other school districts had already in place this past year.
And yes, ma'am. And what's being presented is what we evaluated as far as what monies we've got available to us, what can be done to compensate our staff. And so that's what we're presenting this evening. So again, yes, some school districts do start a different fiscal year. Northeast starts their fiscal year as we do in July. And so again, we use whatever resources are available to us. Then the last slide is again mainly a clarification regarding the increases for our bus drivers. As we propose in our recommendation is to increase the minimum amount of our bus drivers from I believe it's $15.10 to $19. So basically a bus driver works 5 days a week. The minimum rate right now that they're earning is $15.90 an hour. So a base pay workday is $79.50. They work 92 work days, and the total amount is 15,264. For 23-24, again, using the base day workday of 5 hours. I'm sorry, on this, it's 23-24 minimum rate is $19. So now their base workday pay is $95. So again, you multiply that by 192 work days, and the total annual amount is 18,240. Basically providing the bus drivers an increase, entering at the minimum amount of 2,976. What's not included in this, as we know, our bus drivers do many trips. They provide for field trips. They also provide for events that students need to be transported to. So again, this is just looking at the base workday of the bus drivers.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Cavazos.
Mr. Soto. How many bus drivers does this district need? Do you have like a number more or less? And my second question to that is, how many do we actually have right now or this past school year?
Dr. Hinojosa, do you have an estimate on that?
So currently, as far as the openings we have eight bus driver openings and 2 monitor openings. And we currently have about 22 bus drivers.
So in reality, we need 30? At
Yes.
least 30?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Soto, and thank you, Dr. Hinojosa.
Mr. Chairman, so this concludes the follow-up questions that we had from last week's work session.
Well, thank you, sir. Are there any other questions, comments, or ideas that we wanted to present as a team, guys?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Ortiz?
So, Mr. Soto, I had request, can I have additional time? I only had 3 seconds.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Soto, can we look at or discuss 3% of the employees that are below midpoint, the hourly employees that are below midpoint, and then a 3% raise based on salary above the midpoint? So I think we were just looking at 3% based on salary, either or. It was either 3% on the midpoint or 3% on the salary. And I was just asking if maybe there was,
And that was a great question that you had for us. And so we computed that and I believe we emailed it to the board.
About
It was
2
400.
o'clock, 2:30.
Yeah. And the amount for that, the added cost for that would be $441,321.
to do it in
To do
that
it,
kind,
yes,
that
ma'am.
kind
To
of
do
formula
those that are
where
under the midpoint,
do 3% of the
3%,
midpoint
yes, ma'am.
and then those above the midpoint, 3% based on their salary.
yes, ma'am. For the hours.
I'm terribly sorry. I didn't get access
No,
to my
that's,
email.
that's fine. No,
today.
and this, that was just for the hourly folks.
Yes, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Dr. Salinas, Mr. Chair? Dr. Salinas, did TASB have a concern on us doing that, or did they not have a concern with the compression of it going below midpoint, 3%, and above midpoint going on salary?
So the concern is, as was presented tonight, if you do 3% at the midpoint for hourly, they end up getting less of a raise. And so TASB always
No, the way,
recommends-
Ms. Ortiz, so there isn't a concern the way Ms. Ortiz, sent out the email today. I know you were busy with the sub.
Right, with the exception of the cost, which is almost $500,000, correct?
Correct. I mean, it's 441,000. We can certainly follow up with TASB and find out how that affects the pay ranges that are being proposed and, you know, how does that?
Because the last thing I want is the employees, because the employees are them saying, I've been here 20 years.
Mhm.
And someone that just came in the first 3 years is making 10 cents less than me. Those are some of the concerns that we have. And that's what we don't want to fall in with some of our veteran individuals getting very little less, getting a little bit more than the newbies.
Well, and that's a good point. I think what may happen is that when you have employees that are less than the midpoint and they're getting the 3% increase, it moves them up correctly. What's going to happen is those employees that are above the midpoint and they're getting paid on their salary, not on the midpoint, then they start going further out on the scale. So now these individuals below the midpoint, if they were to work the same number of years as these individuals, they're not going to get there. Because the ones that are above the midpoint and they're getting paid on their salary, of course, the amount of the increase is going to be much larger than those that are below the midpoint. So I think that's where TASB would say, it can be done, but just be aware, these individuals are moving further up the pay scale than these individuals that are below the midpoint. So you're getting a wider gap. I mean, that's just the result. But
Mr.
we'll
Chair.
certainly follow up with TASB and make sure that that's correct.
I just have
Yes, ma'am.
one other question, Mr. Soto. So but we're just gonna, if we even look at it, we would only do it for this coming fiscal year. We're not talking about extending it over a period of time. I wanted to ask you something, Mr. Hernandez.
Well, I
We
guess,
make the projection on these over the course of the next, 4 years?
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and then we're going to be going into the deficit, and I understand we would if we continue the way that we are. And so what are the repercussions in, 25, 26, when we go into a deficit? What is, what are we going to do?
Let me get to that slide.
Do we go broke and we go out of business? I've never,
So this is
Well-
what you're referring to. And so one of the things that I want to make sure I clarify is that the increase that's given, if it's done at 3% below, 3% above, that 441,000, just like all of these proposals are recurring costs. So, right, okay. So yes, so when we're looking at the amount of the fund balance here, and we get to this point, I know that staff has been working diligently as far as determining what positions can be addressed with attrition. And that includes not only the positions that are currently being funded, but again, also looking at those positions that we have that are funded with ESSER. Again, the other efforts that are going to be made primarily, and everybody's aware of, is trying to increase our ADA. That's what drives the revenues that we bring in. We're having discussions this morning in order, what can we get from vendors that work with our district? How can we work with them as they do with our HAF to see what they can provide in order for us to provide incentives for our students in attendance, because that's the driver. And that's what we presented in the past when we've looked at our enrollment. It's dropped from 2015. There was at one time at 15,000, and now we're down to basically 12,000. So that's everybody's efforts to try to turn this around by not only looking at current vacancies and filling them when we need to, but also seeing how can we increase this variant of the 10,000 in the ADA. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Castleberry.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind the district and the audience again that the state expects the district to have a fund balance of $25 million.
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
And so that third year out would be a major concern to the state if there are not significant adjustments prior to that time to bring that 14 million up.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to share any comments or anything to brainstorm? Mr.
Mr.
Micah?
Chair, are we gonna discuss the stipends?
Were there some specific stipends that you
Well,
were
sir,
referring to?
my concern is, I agree with Ms. Castleberry and I agree with my colleagues. I mean, we gotta find a way to keep us in that budget. Okay, so if I'm spending an additional $9,500 on a football coach as a stipend, that's coming out of our fund balance. Is there a way to decrease that amount? Is there ways to decrease some of these amounts and tap into us being able to recruit better teachers and keeping teachers where we don't spend so much money in training? We spend almost $1 million in training teachers for 5 years. And then they leave us. So that's money that we throw away. When we can find a way to give them a stipend and keep them longer after those 5 years, instead of you having that rotational where we spending a lot of money on training teachers to become great teachers, and then they end up, other districts take advantage of the work and the effort that we have put into them. When we have put in money into them, and finding a way to keep them, sir. So, I have brought this up many times in the past. Why can't we, if we were to lower some of the stipends to some of the athletic department and move some of that money over, it'll help our fund balance. It'll help us the rotation of our teachers, of finding a way to keeping them here longer. It's like one of the teachers shared earlier, and they're not only teachers, they're counselors, they're social workers, but they don't receive that extra stipend. But if we are able to keep them a little bit longer after those 5 years, sir, can you imagine? We create a root, we planted a plant. Now we let that fruit develop, and instead of taking off all the fruit, we're able to use that fruit and plant some more. So teachers find out, hey, you know what? At Hardendale, if you stay here longer, can I get an extra minute, sir?
That's sir.
If we stay a little bit longer, they'll still take care of us by giving us a stipend, giving us a little bit of a benefit. That was my whole purpose of bringing up the stipends. Calculating just here on the numbers that we have here, sir, we're giving $114,000 in stipends just on these, not knowing how many coaches and how many different coaches we have in different positions. But just with this number here, that's $114,000 just in stipends. And I understand some of them teach, so they're making the salary, and if we don't need to cut it all off, but just cut some of it off. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mancha, for the input. I believe our coaches earn that stipend as the other individuals earn that stipend. To be an athletic coordinator at a middle school, to get $1,500 for the time that they spent. They're right now, my daughters are in summer volleyball, and those athletic coordinators are there from 6 to 9, and that's not even part of their stipend. And that's $1,500 besides what work they're doing at the middle school. I understand we're trying to, one option we can do, sir, is just get rid of all athletics, get rid of all of extracurricular. And what districts are doing is they're letting them go to club ball. It's not the stipends that hurt our budget. It's more the equipment that we have to do for our kids. The uniforms are very expensive, the travel, the officials. Dr. Hinojosa, how much are officials nowadays? $85 to $100 for one official. And so those costs are the ones that we're incurring. So what some school districts are doing, sir, you're on it, is they're not having athletics and extracurriculars in schools. But you know as well as I do, in our community, the kids come for band. They come for athletics. They'll come for a soccer game when it's freezing, and they pass their classes. And I'll be reminisced if we do something like that at Harlandale. They did this. Mr. Hernandez was here. What year did they slash coaches' salaries in half?
It must have been in 08 when we were facing a deficit and we ended up closing, saying that we looked at everything at that time.
And
Mr. Chair, and we did survive, sir, because we didn't cut them completely. We took a little bit off. I remember those days. We didn't cut them off, sir. We took a little bit. You take a little bit to help us survive. Every now and then, you know what? My mom would, when we were young, my mom wouldn't eat so that we could eat. And sometimes we got to do that. We got to make that sacrifice. And sometimes it takes that sacrifice. Sir. I'm not saying take them out, take them away. I'm not saying take away their stipend. It's just work with it. Move numbers around. We can move numbers around. The way we do everything else. We always find a way to move numbers around. I remember in 2008 when we closed there, yes, sir, we did, but we didn't cut them all off, did we, sir? We cut a little bit of their salary, not half, a little bit, took a little bit of their stipend, and we survived. And we didn't lose coaches. We didn't lose that many people. A lot of them stayed because they're loyal. Same thing with like these teachers, they're loyal. They stay because they're loyal.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I? Where should I start? So I would be the first one to admit that one of my personal priorities has always been to listen to staff and administration recommendations. I look at that first before making any decisions or looking into any other options. At least that's what I have been trying to do, sometimes effectively, sometimes not so effectively, since I've been here since 2019. I take the recommendations because they are the experts in whatever is being presented to us. I need another minute.
Yes, ma'am.
However, I understand the importance of us staying a district. I understand the consequences of not having that fund that the state requires. I certainly do not want to bankrupt the district, or I have failed as a voice for our community. I think sometimes we have to sacrifice. I'm not saying sacrifice and slash it all. I'm not saying take away from those that do more than I do for our students. What I would like, and I would hope, is to make some sacrifices that we can possibly live with, in hopes that our ADA does increase. And I know all of that is what if, and hoping and praying and crossing my fingers. But I think it's important that we make some sacrifice as much as we can with pushing that envelope as far as we can within our financial stability, if that's even a possibility, to attract the staff and teachers that we need, that we desperately need to continue to educate these kids, and to retain those that could leave and maybe should leave because of their financial and home situations, but are still here. I'm asking for a lot, and that asking may not come because I'm not the expert of the numbers. But I'd like to see what if options. There may not be any. And I'm sure that if they haven't been presented to us, it's because they're not. But could we get a little creative? Possibly. And even if there's an attempt that can be made, and that attempt does not bring the outcome I'd like to see, even a smidget of that outcome, then I can honestly know we tried, and let's see what we can do with what we have here. That's all I'm saying. And maybe this is my big what if. Doesn't mean it's a certainty. It just means, what if? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? So if we can just go back a little bit, Mr. Hernandez, in regards to, I know our districts, and I don't know, Mr. Soto, you'd like to direct this towards someone else, but being that our fiscal year ends June 30th versus April 30th for others, I think this has been kind of a historical situation in regards to other ISDs deciding to disclose their information related to their salaries and wages. I don't know who we can direct it to. Like typically they don't share out that information, you know, into, well, I mean, they'll do it usually in the summertime, July, usually by mid-July, they'll announce it. But here we had some groups announcing as early as March. And, you know, at what expense did they do those things such as SAISD, making this historical dive into honoring their staff, yet, you know, pretty much dissolving a whole set of positions. Is there something, Mr. Soto, you can, I don't know if someone could enlighten us, maybe Dr. Salinas?
Yeah, Mr. Moreno, I really wouldn't rather allude to SISD in reference to what's going on with them and what they're about to do. As Mr. Hernandez says, and we've been having these town hall meetings, it's dictated on our ADA and how much money is coming in from that 10,171. And so as one community member said, is we're expecting the basic allotment to be more, and it didn't happen. And so if there is a special session that might happen in September, we can always come back. And if it is in favor of our district, as someone noted, our hourlies is easier to come back, but we can do a resolution if it does impact us in a positive manner. Again, so again, another community member mentioned that vouchers is part of the bargaining chip. And so we can revisit that, you know, as right now we're going into listening to some concerns, and we looked at raising it, you know, the dollar amount for our hourlies. We're looking at that 3%. I believe most districts are going to be at 3%. And because it's just not at Harlandale, it's every school district was banking on a raise of the basic allotment, and it didn't happen. So we're all kind of on hold and wait and see, even though our budget begins a little earlier in the summer, as you alluded to, sir.
Thank you, sir. And also, I guess with that, sir, as my colleagues have made some fair assessments and evaluations, could you provide, because I think in regards to the last couple of years, our team here in collaboration with the superintendent and his team, you know, there have been opportunities to provide other avenues to compensate our staff. Or can you kind of refresh our memory in regards to those longstanding incentives?
Yes, sir, Mr. Moreno. So we're going to keep intact if the teacher does come to work, because they still get their local and state days. And if they come to work, they start with $1,000. And so when they are absent, they unexcused absent, they lose 100 per day. So there's still the opportunity to get $1,000 on that note. And as Dr. Salinas noted, we're looking at some form of insurance where they can have, instead of spending money on urgent care, or when they have allergies and they need to go to urgent care, spend $50 for a visit, it would be free, get some lab work for free. And where the district would pay that cost of $30 or $60, depending on if it's the spouse is included with them. So we're looking at some creative ways, as Ms. Cavazos asked, is how can we be creative? We are trying, ma'am. Trust me, we are. We're trying to compensate our employees with the 3% raise. We think that's going to be fair. I know it doesn't put us on top of the salaries, but again, it's what we have here at Harlandale and what we can afford right now. If you look at some of the other school districts that we're noting, again, what is their attendance and what is their size of staff? And I believe me and you were sitting next to each other one time, and we were looking at some of these school districts that are twice the size of us, and they have like 1,200 employees, right? I mean, so there's things that we have to make Harlandale right with in regards to our ADA, our enrollment, and our staffing.
Thank you, sir. And I know you alluded to the ADA. I know as a team, we were able to represent our group last week at that partnership luncheon. Could you also kind of add how that might help in creating those incentives for our ADA? Because I know we're looking at $7 million of lost revenue when it comes to ADA based off of 89%.
Yes, Mr. Moreno. So we're reaching out to our partners to see, as Mr. Hernandez spoke on it earlier, is how can we get our partners that are Harlandale partners and been loyal partners to us on how to get some incentives for our children? Because once our children are incentivized, they'll tell mom and dad, hey, you need to get up. You need to take me to school because I want to be in that drawing for a bike, or I want to be in that drawing for an iPhone or what have you. And so we're going to try to get as many things to entice our children to come to school and make mom and dad bring them to school.
Thank you, sir. And I know the consensus amongst the group is we want to fairly and equitably compensate our staff, and we're all looking at other ways, and that's what this work session is for us to be able to brainstorm and collectively think out loud and be able to provide some insight and clarity for one another. So I know as we continue on, I mean, we still have, I believe, Mr. Hernandez, another 2 prior to the final budget vote.
Sir, yes, sir. And then the plan is to adopt a budget on a regular board meeting on July the 19th. Prior to that, June, why did I say July? June. And then, of course, we have our work session the Wednesday before that, so we can certainly bring any updates and answers or replies to inquiries by our board members and provide an updated budget on that day as well as a work session.
Yeah, and again, it's a fair assessment on all our colleagues here in collaboration and making sure, just a friendly reminder, if there are other questions or concerns or commentary that you'd like to share, you're more than welcome to direct those to Mr. Soto, and he'll delegate it to the necessary staff member. And I think that's the genesis of this whole budget work section, is for us to be able to collaborate and be able to share those ideas for the betterment of our community. So we appreciate that. I don't know if anyone else had any other comments or questions or anything they wanted to share out prior to us proceeding. Looks like we're all good, right? Mr. Luna, was there anything you'd like to share or question?
The only thing that comes spring to mind, I'm sure, is I know these are I know Mr. Hernandez usually goes on worst case scenario, but my feeling is that needs to be more in a realistic scenario. So I was just thinking, like some other people think of, you trim the fat, but like you say, we don't really know. Like today, we were at an event, we had so many people there. We're honoring our substitutes, and I can run into this person and this person and that person. It's like, well, how many people do we need in this department to do this job? That's not really my job. My job is to approve what's going on. But I'm trying to get to things, how do we come to realistically budget that's more realistic than this one, because we can cut those positions. I know, like those coaching positions, and not the athletic coaching, but the academic coaches and other positions that I know some districts don't have or are fortunate to have. So we have to just look at realistically which positions we can keep and which ones we can function without. So that's where I'm looking at to see what kind of realistic budget we can get on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your ideas and thoughts. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, may I please, Mr. Luna brought a question. All those positions that were funded by ESSER money, those are positions that when they signed on, they knew once that funding, and I know you've said this, Dr. Salinas, before, and Mr. Hernandez, but I just wanted to be real clear. Those positions and the people that filled each of those positions know your job ends when that money stops funding that position. Is that correct?
And that's regarding the what we call our MCL and RTI teachers. The other positions that are being supplanted from the general fund. Those, they did not sign because they originally are being funded by general fund. It's just ESSER allows us to supplant those positions and then bank that money in the general fund. But it's the MCL, RTI teachers, yes. They were under the grant program that ends on 2023-24.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, even at my school district, we have the same situation where they supplant content teachers. And so they're not going to get rid of those teachers, but we are going to have to offset those costs in some capacity. And what our campus or district's going to do is they're going to just attrition people out that are not, they're going to dissolve positions. So I don't know if anyone has anything else, then we can go ahead and move on to the next item, which would be adjournment, I believe.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I move to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
We have a second by we have a motion by Ms. Ortiz and a second by Ms. Cavazos. When IT is ready, we can go ahead and open up. All right, the voting is open. Sorry. All right, we can go ahead and close it, sir. All right, motion carries. And prior to closing our meeting, I do want to send obviously congratulations to our recent graduates, but also we do have a special celebration for Ms. Cavazos.
Yes, you do, because y'all
Happy
forgot
birthday.
about me yesterday. Not just kidding. It
So
was
what is
a
it?
day for class of 2023. So we went and acknowledged only them. It was their day yesterday for Harlandale High School and McCullum. It was such a beautiful ceremony, both. I appreciate all the work that the staff did and the teachers. It was a beautiful day all around to celebrate the students, the teachers that did the work, the students that did the work, and the family that did the work and saw that reward yesterday. So, but thank you so much.
Still,
Yeah,
happy
wish-
birthday, Miss Cavazos.
Yeah, and I know our team wanted to do something nice for you. So
Thank
Thank
you
you too.
so much. I appreciate it.
it is now